Hey everyone, and welcome back to Rank and File Sports. And today we're going to be hopping right back into our series where we are predicting every single Power 4 team's record by the start of the college football season. Today with the Maryland Terrapins. Now, Maryland is going to look quite a bit different this season. They've lost a lot of players, and the Big Ten itself is changing. Just overall, it's going to be a very, very different season for the Terrapins. And with their schedule, they are probably going to struggle to make a bowl game. Now, the goal here is to find just 6 winnable games for the Terrapins. The first game of the year against UConn, that would definitely count as a winnable game. So would Michigan State, especially given that it's at home. Maryland will probably be favored in that game. On the road at Virginia, one of the teams that will be finishing near the bottom of the ACC. This one also is winnable for Maryland, but it's going to be a tougher game for them to win. And Villanova is definitely a winnable game at home, so they could even start out 4-0. The schedule gets more difficult after that. On the road at Indiana is going to be tough for this Maryland team. Indiana and Maryland are pretty comparable as far as overall talent, but this feels like a game that will be pretty low scoring, that Indiana will try and control the line of scrimmage on and most likely win. However, it's definitely winnable for Maryland. It would just be an upset if they did. Following the bye week, Northwestern at home is also a winnable game, but this is a pretty experienced Northwestern team, and they are going to be tough to beat for Maryland at home, given the level of talent that Maryland has. USC at home is going to be a really tough matchup for this team. The Trojans are pretty talented overall, especially on offense, and in all likelihood, they're just going to outscore Maryland here. On the road at Minnesota is probably the last game of the season that Maryland would have a chance to win. Given that it's on the road, it's not going to be an easy one. But this Minnesota team really isn't very good. So this is one to consider as a possible game for the Terps to win before their second bye week. And after that, the last 4 games are very, very tough, with a road trip to Oregon, Rutgers and Iowa at home, and a road trip to Penn State. So overall, they have 7 home games and 5 away games. And with 3 of their opponents being ranked in the rank and file top 25, we rated their schedule at a 6 out of 10.
Looking at the guaranteed wins for Maryland, we have Villanova and UConn. Villanova is an FCS school in football, so we don't think they're going to be able to compete with a Maryland team that's middle of the pack in the Big Ten. And as far as UConn goes, in 2022, they had a surprising season where they made a bowl game. Um, Unfortunately, last year they regressed back into their old ways of losing. So we expect that trend to continue into this season, and we expect Maryland to win this game pretty easily. Looking at the likely wins, we have Michigan State and Northwestern. Michigan State is one of the worst teams in the Big Ten on paper this season. They do have some talent. They're bringing over the coach from Oregon State. His name's Jonathan Smith. He was very successful at Oregon State. He built one of the worst Pac 12 programs into respectability rather quickly, and he has more resources at Michigan State. So the logical conclusion is that over time he will be able to build them back into contention. However, we don't think it will happen this quickly, and we think Maryland's in better shape than we are, so we got to give the advantage to Maryland on paper. As far as Northwestern goes, Northwestern shocked the world last year after a major scandal that got Coach Pat Fitzgerald fired, and they won 8 games in a bowl game against Utah. Under interim coach David Braun, who has since had his interim tag removed, and he is now the full-time coach. But the games in College Park, we don't think Northwestern's going to be able to win on the road against the Terps. Looking at the toss-ups for the Terps, we have Virginia, Indiana, Minnesota, and Rutgers. We think Maryland on paper is much better than Virginia or Indiana, but Maryland does tend to lose a game or two every season that they shouldn't. They started very strong last season, gave Ohio State a good game, and then really had a disastrous finish to last season. So that's why we don't think it's totally out of the realm of possibility that Virginia and Indiana are able to win. As far as Minnesota goes, this is a tough matchup for Maryland, and frankly, so is Rutgers. They both, specifically Minnesota and Rutgers play great defense. They're physical. The line play is pretty good, especially for the Gophers. And Maryland's, they seem to commit a lot of penalties that are avoidable. They're not very disciplined, not super fundamentally sound, but they do have great athletes. That's the one, that's the one consolation, right? That's what they're able to uh, have on these opponents is their athleticism. So that's what keeps them in the game, and it could even enable them to win. Looking at the likely losses for Maryland, it's USC and Iowa. As far as USC goes, USC is a lot like Maryland in the sense that their defense isn't very good. They're not fundamentally sound. They're not disciplined. They commit a lot of dumb penalties. Um, but they have better athletes than Maryland, and you're not going to beat a team with better athletes when your team's whole success is based on their athleticism. So that's why we have USC with a pretty decent size advantage over Maryland. As far as Iowa goes, Iowa's defense is just too locked down for a team like Maryland, who isn't very disciplined, to be able to get away with the mistakes that they're inevitably going to make. We like Maryland. We think they're a fun team, but unfortunately for the Terps, they're not going to be able to hang with the Hawkeyes. I mean, the score might suggest so, but the outcome will never be in doubt. Looking at the guaranteed losses for Maryland this year, we only have two of them. It's Oregon and Penn State. We think Oregon could very well win the national championship. Obviously, Maryland is not on that level, so we would be absolutely shocked if the Ducks were to drop this one against the Terps. As far as Penn State goes, this is a Penn State team who plays great defense. Their defense is elite, and if Drew Aller shows any signs of improvement, which we expect him to, we don't expect the Nittany Lions to have much of a problem against the Terps.
Taking a look at the schedule review, we do have the Terps starting off the season with a win against UConn. However, although we have them favored against Michigan State at home, we do have them dropping their Big Ten opener to the Spartans. On the road at Virginia and at home against Villanova, we do believe the Terps will be favored in both of those games, and we have them winning both of those games, moving to 3-1. Following their bye week after the loss to Indiana, we do also have them beating Northwestern as their last win. Now, looking at all of these losses, Indiana on the road, like I mentioned, is going to be a pretty tough game for this Terps team. We do believe Indiana will be favored, and we ended up going with the Hoosiers. And closing out the season, those last 6 games are going to be tough. The road trip to Minnesota is probably the only game out of those 6 that's really winnable for Maryland. And we did end up going with the Golden Gophers at home there, which puts Maryland's record at 4-8. The projected record does favor them getting really close to that 6-win mark at 5.65 and 6.35. FPI likes the Terps in a bowl game. We don't really see that happening. There's a chance if they start out the season maybe with that win over Michigan State, and then they just have to win one of the 2 on the road against Indiana and Minnesota, it would be possible. But there's also a chance that they lose on the road to Virginia, or they could lose at home to Northwestern. Neither of those are guaranteed, so it's really tough to see this Maryland team making a bowl game. And they have a 4.8% chance to make the college football playoffs per FPI. So, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our future content.